Thank you for joining me. I'd like to talk to you about the importance of being energetically conscious when it comes to our health and well-being. We probably already understand that everything is energy, but I'd like to just run through that with you again, because it's when we understand ourselves as energy and we understand the stimuli, the substances, the food, the activities, the environments that we expose ourselves to as frequency, we begin to understand the importance of those frequencies being positive and impacting us in a healthy way. Looking at everything as energy, it's not a new concept. Shamans and medicine people, traditional medicine people all over the world from many different cultures have known this for eons. However, science is now starting to catch up with this understanding and is actually proving it for us. We now understand that nothing is solid. There is no such thing as solid matter. Everything is made up of atoms, and atoms are 99.999% space. This shows us that everything is in fact energetic if nothing is solid. Then we go further and we look at something in physics called an entanglement theory, which tells us that atoms can connect to each other. And this connection, once happened, ensures that atoms respond not only to each other, but they are also influenced by external stimuli and essentially by the vibrations that affect even other atoms. This shows us that our environments are energetic, that we are energetic, and that essentially everything is impacted by everything else or influences everything else, and that everything that we come into contact with has value, has importance. Every thought, feeling, emotion, substance, person, all stimuli are energetic, and everything vibrates at frequency at its subatomic level. So I'd like you to imagine, just for a moment, the following. Imagine your body as a body of light filled with filaments or lines or channels of energy, vibrational energies that extend into your auric field and from there extend into everything else. Now imagine yourself in a perfect state of health, in a perfect state of well-being, and understand that those frequencies, those channels of light that your body is made up of at a subatomic level are in fact life force. This is vitality coursing through you and energy that makes up your whole being. Now imagine, incidentally, those channels are called nadis in two different cultures. Okay guys, we're going to have to start that again. These channels of energy are known as nadis, which in Sanskrit literally means channel. And they, according to Ayurvedic medicine, there are 77,000 nadis in a human energy system. And according to Chinese medicine, there are 144,000, direct double quantity. So these nadis, when we are in a perfect state of health, imagine these filaments of energy vibrating with this extraordinary light, pulsing with frequency in a balanced and harmonious way. But when those vibrations or those filaments of light are repeatedly impacted in a certain area or in a certain way, it creates a dark patch or a blackened or blocked spot on that imagery. Now, really what that is a disharmony to the natural frequency that flows through our being, through our bodies, through our energy fields. And that disharmony will have an impact emotionally, mentally, physically, and obviously it originates in the energetic makeup of our energy system. Setting aside the image of your energy as a light body, we need to look at for a moment at cellular memory. Now, we often just use this term quite, naturally. However, cellular memory is only recently proved scientifically, and yet its existence is completely logical. If you have any awareness of stem cells, which I'm sure you do, you'll know that stem cell therapy is something that can restore us back to the original state of health that we carry with us at the point of birth. So in other words, that health is something that is free of all those impacts that we described previously. They've recently found that stem cells actually carry a type of memory, a form of memory, and they're able to transmit memory of that original state of health to the immune system. And it is through that transference that the immune system is able to identify disease imbalances, etc., and deal with them. By the same token, cells generally have memory too. You may or may not be aware of the fact that most cells can live anywhere from a couple of weeks to over a year, up to about 18 months, depending on which part of the body they're actually found in. So when we, for example, have a trauma, and that trauma is held within our cellular memory, that trauma or the memory of it is passed to the next generation of cells in that area, perpetuating the state of that area of the body in an ongoing way. By the same token, if we have good health in an area of the body, that same cellular memory will be passed to the next generation. If this weren't the case, we would literally change appearance, or we would be able to discard disease instantaneously as cells passed away and new cells were born. So keeping this in mind, we need to then recognize that our health is formed in or is taken from two areas. The one is the past and the other is the present. When we talk about the past, obviously these are the past impacts which are stored on a cellular level in our body, and that cellular memory can actually be changed, but it's not as simple as simply a cell not transferring memory to the next generation of cells. It requires that we change memory at a subatomic level. So what is coming from the subconscious is altered, and a different frequency is transmitted to those cells, creating a different type of frequency within the cell and altering then the state of well-being. There are many forms of healing. In fact, most forms of healing are built or born out of this understanding. And it is the healing of our unconscious patterning which causes us emotional reactions, limiting beliefs, and obviously ultimately can manifest as physical disease imbalances or illnesses. Healing the past requires that we live consciously and is a journey of awareness, and the numerous healing tools that are available on our planet that deal with the transference of memory from the subconscious into the cells of our body or our conscious minds should be utilized for this purpose. But the area that I'd like to discuss with you, which is often understated, is the importance of the frequencies that we are exposed to in the present, the frequencies that impact us on a day-to-day basis. This is the stimulus and what we feed ourselves on all levels on a day-to-day, in our day-to-day experiences and our daily living. So let's have a look at the various areas or types of stimulus and substances, etc., external impacts and influences, let's call them, that we expose ourselves to on a constant basis. Well, physically, there is our food, the substances that we consume through foods would include anything from minerals, nutrients, amino acids, trace elements, vitamins, etc. But these days we also have to be aware of consuming things like chemicals in our food. Substances that we expose ourselves to, this can be anything from deodorant, hairspray, hand sanitizer, etc. The exercise that we engage in, believe it or not, but a lot of exercise is actually built around the stimulation of the adrenal glands, and this is definitely not exercise that actually stimulates chi or life force specifically. There are various types of exercise that actually do that, and we will look at them a little bit more in depth. The activities that we involve ourselves in. So certain activities cause us extreme stress. Certain activities are enjoyable to us, or they are at the very least acceptable or don't cause us types of stress. There are then, of course, activities that we engage in that are extremely useful to us and feed us in very positive ways, relaxing and comforting activities. People that we surround ourselves with. The people that we have to engage with, if we live in cities, we don't have the same type of filters that people have who are living in more underpopulated environments. But certainly for us to expose ourselves in our personal relationships and in our engagements with people that are unhealthy for us or that bring out the worst in us, people who make us feel less or where we give our power away, etc. These obviously are unhealthy circumstances, but we will look at them again shortly. Mentally and emotionally, we can categorize those two areas together, but the feelings and emotion that is stimulated within us also feeds us with frequency, as do movies, books, music, social media. All of these things go towards strengthening or disengaging our thoughts, our beliefs, our perceptions around ourselves, the way that we think about ourselves, the way that we look at ourselves, not only from an aesthetic level, but what we fill our minds with, what we fill our consciousness with, the literal frequencies that are flowing into us or towards us, or that we are ingesting or engaging, that are absolutely alien to the natural vibration that flows through us on a constant and organic level. So redirecting for a moment, I'd like to look more deliberately at the role of life force or chi in our well-being. Well, first of all, chi is absolutely natural to us, life force. It is the frequency and the energy that is, first of all, very high in its vibration. And secondly, when we have enough of it, not too little, we are in balance. We are held in harmony. The flow of energy through our body is well distributed. Our organs function in harmony, etc. And of course, that imagery of our light bodies is also flowing and vibrating with amazing quantities of light through the nadis. But also, of course, keeping in mind that the chi sustains our body of light as well as our physical body. But how do we get chi? How do we ensure that we have enough chi? Well, there are two ways in which we actually consume chi. Because we are in our essence, in our nature, made up of these incredible filaments of light, we are able to generate it. Through various practices, we are able to stimulate more chi within our own energy system. These practices include things like meditation. It includes forms of exercise that we mentioned previously. These forms of exercise would include things like Qigong, Tai Chi, Chi Nadi, yoga, etc. There are various forms of breathing exercises, pranic forms of breathing exercises, which help us to increase the amount of chi that we carry in ourselves. We are also able to consume chi. So we consume it by absorbing it either through food that we engage in our bodies, or we are able to consume it from our environments, believe it or not. And it is primarily through our engagement with nature that we are able to do this. Life force is completely natural to us, and believe it or not, most people seem to forget it, but we are part of nature. Most people seem to imagine that we are separate to nature and that it is something that we either control or dominate, or that lives outside our window, or that we engage with when we go on holidays. Nature is very much a part of us, and we are a part of it. There's in fact no separation. And nature is full of chi and life force. It is full of prana. And so when we spend time in nature, when we spend time outdoors, engaging especially consciously with nature, we are able to absorb more chi into our systems. So when we look at frequency outside of us, when we look at what we consume, etc., how should we be approaching this? Well, as we've just discussed, we are nature. And so, for example, if we take diet, we need to eat as much living food as possible. Now, what we refer to there is raw food, foods like vegetables and fruits that haven't been processed. Dehydrated food is still absolutely healthy, as are many other forms of food, frozen foods, etc. However, obviously the fresher and raw, the degree to which a food is uncooked or raw is healthier for us. Why? Because these foods carry chi. They have life force in them. And it is through the consumption of these foods that we are able to do this. Exercises like juicing are extremely healthy because we are not only consuming vitamins and minerals in a liquid and natural form, but we are also able to consume chi from food, from living, natural, organic foods. Exercises, we spoke about this. There are forms of exercise that are adrenaline based, and these are forms of exercise that stimulate the adrenal glands in a very sort of almost primitive way. However, there are forms of exercise that we should engage with that are extremely good for us. And as I mentioned to you earlier, these include things like yoga, Tai Chi, Chi Nadi, Qigong, etc. These are forms of exercise that are designed specifically to increase the flow of chi, or the quantity of chi that we are able to generate through our energy systems. We should also look at our environments. So we can spend all day in artificial environments, especially if we work in corporate or in offices, in buildings, etc., and never actually come into contact with nature. It's frightening how the length of time that a person can spend away from even a patch of grass or a tree at close proximity. We need to look at the type of lighting that we have around us. Forms of artificial lighting can be extremely unhealthy for us and can affect our frequency very badly. The same with buildings where there are a number of floors and layers of reinforced steel, layers of concrete, etc. Now, we're not always able to, for example, move out of the company we work for or change offices, etc. But we need to counterbalance these environments. So if we find that we are working on the 12th floor of a building that has a huge quantity of reinforced steel, we need to try to either spend our lunch hour in the park, or at the very least engage with nature through the plants in our garden, or take a walk in a park, or exercise outdoors, etc., in order to try and engage more of a natural environment during the course of the day. We mentioned earlier, and I'd like to just discuss it in a little bit more depth now, relationships with other people, the people that we surround ourselves with in our daily living. People influence us in a very direct and an indirect way, in that the direct ways in which we are influenced by other people are through the conversations, the engagements, the communications, activities we involve ourselves with others, the events that happen, and so on. But we also need to look at the more subtle ways, the non-direct ways in which we are influenced. The people that we surround ourselves with, their beliefs, their perceptions, the way that they view reality, what they fill their minds with. These can be very directly influential on us. For example, you might engage with somebody at the office or at home who has a great fear around a certain area and doesn't necessarily talk about it. Let's say, for example, they have a fear of not having enough, and it manifests for them as a financial fear. If you engage that person in a relationship or in a circumstance on a constant basis, and there is a regular input, it is very likely that you yourself will start to engage that thought process or that belief without even realizing that you're doing it, because the frequency of their thoughts and the frequency of their beliefs, their feelings, starts to infiltrate and affect us at a very subtle level. So we need to look at our relationships. We need to look at the type of people that we surround ourselves with. Are they healthy for us? Are they people that help to promote well-being and balance and health and healing in our lives? It's not always easy to make decisions about letting go of people that we care about or even love because they are toxic for us. But generally, we will find that these are not relationships of care and love, but are rather relationships of codependency, relationships that support either substance abuses or forms of self-abuse or negative behaviors in ourselves that we are not looking at and we are not working with. So what I'm trying to say here is, very often our relationships around us reflect the areas in ourselves that we are either not owning, or that we are not, where we're not acknowledging how amazing we actually are. This is obviously not something that happens overnight, but it is something that we need to become aware of. Can you counterbalance toxicity in your relationships? I guess you can, but it is hard work and it's constant vigilance. It's about keeping other people's thought processes and emotional states at bay by reinforcing positive ones in yourself constantly. Another area that we need to look at are the activities that we engage with. Well, sure, we have to do certain things every day in order to survive. I'm terming this information as though we live in cities or we live in populated environments. There are those fortunate people that live in more remote areas that don't come into contact with shopping centers and vehicles and so on a daily basis. But for the rest of us, these are the areas and things that we have to engage with every day. But we also need to look at the attitude with which we engage our kind of survival activities, and if we can do them as stress-free as possible. So for example, to do your grocery shopping at the end of the day when you've already had a stressful day at work is not necessarily the wisest choice. Sometimes these things are necessary, but sometimes we can engage them in a different way. If we are stressed to go to the pub and to get wasted, is not necessarily the healthiest way to deal with our stress. Rather to deal with our stress from a different perspective, and then if we want to engage in a substance like alcohol, to do so from a position that is not based on trying to drown out something else, but is perhaps engaging it as an enjoyment with a meal or whatever the case may be. So we need to look at the activities that we engage ourselves in on a daily basis, and are we first of all engaging those activities in the best way for ourselves? Is it the most supportive experience for our well-being? And are all of these activities absolutely necessary? Are we sometimes engaging things unnecessarily that are unhealthy for us? Now, another area that is actually quite interesting is the frequency of all the sort of non-natural stimuli that we tend to find ourselves exposed to in our modern societies. This includes movies, music, books, social media, basically the incoming information that we are exposed to. So let's look at something like movies. We know that when we go to a movie house and we sit and watch a movie about, let's say, an animal that is a heartbreaking story but ends with a beautiful ending. In a movie like that, we go through several different emotions. We might experience tension on a physical level, a sense of fear at certain times. We might experience joy, we might experience a feeling of love, sadness, etc. If we watch a horror movie, we might experience a tension right throughout that movie. We might experience levels of fear and stress. So if we look at the kind of movies that we keep engaging ourselves in, everybody has their favorite themes. We will find that we are perpetuating certain types of stimulation for ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that you can't watch a horror movie. Of course you can. But if you only watch horror movies and nothing else, you're going to perpetuate a type of frequency in your auric field, which may or may not result in certain feelings being established on a permanent basis. So I would suggest change it up. For myself personally, I've always been drawn to serial killer movies and crime movies, but I've also recognized that they are not a good form of switch off. On a permanent basis, I need to mix in comedy and other lighter forms of entertainment so that I'm able to access a broad spectrum of frequency in the movies that I watch. The same is true of music. I'm not suggesting that you can't listen to death metal. If that is your vibe, listen to death metal. But understand that if you only listen to death metal, you're very likely going to start experiencing, let's say, perhaps an aggressive frequency in yourself, because it is an aggressive form of music. And although aggression may have its place in our world and in our lives individually, to have a perpetuation of that on an ongoing basis, it's an overkill. It's too much. But if we listen to death metal at certain times and mix it up with classical music or instrumental music and happier sing-along kind of music, as well as dance music and perhaps types of music that is designed purely for listening or as background music, we start to engage a greater spectrum of frequency in our music, and it is far more healthy for us. It's a far more balanced engagement. The same with the books that we read. These days, a lot of the movies that we read are based on books. But if we repeatedly, let's say, for example, yearn for a certain type of experience in our lives, and we are repeatedly engaging books that present that type of experience, first of all, the likelihood of us actually grounding that experience for ourselves is unlikely. But we tend to then feed a certain frequency to ourselves because we are not actually engaging the physical experience. So it is better for us to obviously have the physical experience and to again engage a broad spectrum in our reading material. Social media and media, sure, on the one hand is a blessing, and on the other it is a curse. There is so much false information that is available through social media, and also information that can be extremely harmful. And yet at the same time, it can be highly entertaining, very amusing, and informative. So again, we need to look at what type of social media are we engaging in, not only the platforms, but the people that we link ourselves to there, the organizations, the associations, etc. What kind of petitions are we signing? What kind of social awareness are we engaging? I believe that there are areas of social media that are actually very, very dark and can be quite cruel and unhealthy for us. And yet there are areas that can be positive and, as I said, entertaining. So again, it's about looking at what am I feeding myself? What am I feeding my mind through what I'm exposing myself to in the books I'm reading, in the social media I'm engaging, in the music I'm listening to, and the music that I'm watching. This is a very personal experience, and yet balance in this area is imperative, just like everything else. I guess it's about feeding ourselves as much positivity as we can, because in a general sense, we have to deal with so many difficult areas in our day-to-day living, so many areas of stress. Our society is not always positive. In fact, there's a lot of challenge that it presents to us. Our environments, especially in the cities, are unhealthy, to say the least. So to increase as much positivity mentally, emotionally, and physically as we can for ourselves. So in our conclusion, let's just have a look at what are the different tools that we can utilize here for ourselves. Well, first of all, we need to spend time connecting to the light filaments within ourselves, simply put. Those light filaments, or that energy, that frequency at that level, is really our nature. It is the essence of ourselves. It is beautiful, it is vibrant, and it is full of chi. And we can do this very simply through meditation and forms of introspection. There are so many different forms of meditation available these days. I'm sure I don't have to go into them in great depth. And many people these days meditate. Whether they meditate from a more sort of scientific perspective with forms of transcendental meditation or mindfulness meditation, or whether they lean towards the more spiritual forms of meditation using mantras and yantras and forms of visualization, etc. These are personal choices, and they are all exceptionally healthy. So to spend time in meditation, to set time aside as often as we can, I have had students often say to me that they can't get into meditation or they don't enjoy meditation. It feels like a chore. If that is the case, it is simply because we haven't actually found the right form of meditation for ourselves and we haven't fallen in love with it. When you find the right form of meditation for yourself, it is literally something that you would choose to do for yourself every day, because it is something that feeds you in such a real and tangible sense and brings such an incredible sense of centeredness and peace. There are other forms of introspection, and I would include here, or rather perhaps before we go into introspection, include forms of breathing exercises. It is a form of meditation actually, Vipassana meditation or other, but breathing to increase the prana in our body is a wonderful way to center ourselves and balance ourselves and energize ourselves. And it is through forms of breathing, by slowing our breathing, that we can move into a type of introspection, or move into ourselves generally. Introspection gives us the opportunity to look at ourselves, to look at what we're experiencing, to look at the day that we've had, the type of impacts and frequencies that we're exposing ourselves to, etc. To look at the things that are making us happy and the things that aren't. This is an incredibly important journey for us, and it's our lives. We need to make sure that we live it as consciously as possible. Being in nature, we touched on this briefly, but I'd like to go into it in greater depth. So, what does nature actually do for us? In order to understand this, we need to look at the 4 elements. So let's start with the earth element. The 4 elements, of course, being earth, water, air, and fire. The earth element is the densest of all the elements, not only because it is so tangibly physical and solid, but also because its vibration is the slowest of all of the elements. And yet the earth element the slowness of its vibration is not unhealthy for us. On the contrary, we actually need the earth element in order to ground ourselves. We take from the earth every mineral, vitamin, amino acid, trace element, all the sustenance that we need in order to have healthy bodies. If we take care of our earth, we take care of our bodies, because what we put into our bodies from the earth is exceptionally healthy and balanced. By the same token, the earth also provides for us all of our literally every single thing that we utilize in our day-to-day living. Every material, physical object, everything that we use or engage with comes from earth. The earth element is incredibly important because it not only grounds us, but to summarize, it brings us physical health. The water element is a less dense element than the earth element, and as a result its frequency is a little higher. The water element influences very directly our emotions and our feelings inside of ourselves. The water helps us to not only deal with ourselves emotionally, but also psychically. All of the psychic frequency or the psychic experience that we have flows through the water element in our bodies. And of course, on a physical level, the water is very much responsible for our hydration, keeping ourselves well hydrated. So to summarize, water is responsible or helps to keep in balance ourselves emotionally, our psychic energies, and of course our physical hydration. We cannot live without it either. Air, which is a far more refined, in fact, it is the most refined of the four elements. Obviously, without air, we cannot breathe. So we engage the air element on a constant basis, but the quality of the air that we engage determines the quantity of prana or life force that we will absorb in through our bodies, in through our breathing and into our bodies. So air helps us to keep a clear mind. It helps to govern our beliefs and our intellects in an energetic sense. And obviously it helps to energize our bodies by carrying life force into our bodies and of course distributing this vital substance called oxygen that we need, this vital gas. And fire is the final element that we look at, and fire is of course less refined than air, but it is an incredibly important element because fire governs our body temperature. It is through fire that we are able to sustain a constant body temperature. We know that if our temperature drops, we can get hypothermia, and if it increases, we experience levels of fever. Okay, Gabs, you need to stop it. We can't have dogs. The final element that we look at, of course, is fire, which on a physical level helps to support our body temperature, or not helps to support, it governs our body temperature. You know that if your temperature drops, you can get hypothermia, and if your temperature increases, you can have a fever. Of course, fire helps on a spiritual level with our expansion and our evolution. And on a very mundane human level, it is through our fire that we have courage. But the fire has another manifestation, and that is the sun, which provides us with vitamin D. It also helps to keep our emotions buoyant. In very cold, dark places, it is not uncommon for people to become depressed when they cannot actually see or access sunlight. So in closure, we absorb earth energy through our food and also from walking on the earth, barefoot preferably, from gardening and from being present with the earth element in this way. We absorb water energy or chi, life force through water, by obviously drinking it and also by swimming in water or engaging water externally. The air element, we absorb prana and life force or chi through air, through breathing, through breath. And the fire element, we absorb the energy of fire either through our eyes, by looking at fire, etc., and also, of course, from exposing ourselves to it in the form of sunlight. So the elements and keeping ourselves fed through nature is probably the most balancing experience and the healthy experience that any of us can include in our daily living. The elements, however, are an entire teaching on their own. There is so much information about them. In closure, just to conclude our talk, I would like to just say that probably the only other frequency that we need to keep present is the frequency of love. It is to hold ourselves in a state of love no matter what we go through, no matter what happens in our lives, no matter how we behave or what manifests for us. It's to keep our heart centers open to who we are. By doing that, we eliminate the judgment, and to hold ourselves in love on a physical level, to love our bodies and literally tell them how amazing they are for supporting us, for looking after us, for giving us a vessel to function in this world, rather than feeling as though we need to control them or try to aesthetically improve them. To hold ourselves emotionally in love, no matter what we go through, no matter what negative emotions we may experience or project or bring to our daily living, to hold ourselves in love, knowing that it's actually okay. Mentally, to hold ourselves lovingly, no matter the negative thoughts that we have, the projections that we have. As soon as we just tell ourselves that it's actually all right, they just dissipate. So together with nature, to hold ourselves in a loving way is probably the most powerful thing that we can do in terms of keeping our frequency high and not eroding it or eliminating it personally. Adding to that, the incredible exposure that we have to every possible form of stimuli and substance, and ensuring that we feed ourselves in the most positive way that we can. Thank you very much.